"Don't open that water bottle," a night security guard shouted. What the tech billionaire learned changed everything. The boardroom on the 48th floor was so quiet that the soft crackle of ice inside a crystal glass sounded deafening. Every executive around the polished walnut table held their breath. The biggest acquisition in the company's history was only minutes away from becoming official. One signature. That was all it would take. At the head of the table sat Victoria Reynolds, founder and CEO of one of America's fastest-growing cybersecurity companies. At 43, she had built a multi-billion-dollar empire from a tiny garage startup in Denver. Business magazines called her the woman Silicon Valley couldn't beat. Calm, focused, untouchable. She reached toward the chilled bottle of mineral water placed beside her legal documents. Her fingers wrapped around the cap. She twisted it. Across the hallway, a man pushing a gray janitor's cart suddenly froze. His heart nearly stopped. From where he stood outside the conference room, he had just watched someone do something no one else noticed. A tiny clear syringe. A quick movement. A single drop. Then the bottle had been placed back on the silver serving tray as if nothing had happened. The janitor didn't think. He ran. The heavy conference room doors burst open. "Don't open that, waiter, B.O. Lee!" Every face snapped toward him. For one endless second, no one moved. No one breathed. And the secret he'd spent 8 years risking his life to uncover was finally about to explode. 8 years earlier, Daniel Brooks never imagined his life would become a lie. Back then, he wasn't pushing mop buckets through corporate hallways. He wore pressed shirts, worked in cybersecurity, owned a small house outside Nashville, had a wife who laughed at terrible jokes, and a 5-year-old son who believed his dad could fix absolutely anything. Life wasn't perfect, but it was enough. His wife, Emily, had just accepted a dream position as a senior financial compliance analyst for Atlas Dynamics, one of the country's largest defense technology contractors. She loved puzzles, numbers, patterns. If money disappeared, Emily found it. 3 months into the new job, she became different. She stopped sleeping, checked over her shoulder while grocery shopping, locked every door twice before bed. Daniel noticed. "What happened?" She smiled. "I'm just stressed." He didn't believe her. One rainy Tuesday evening, she called him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dan, I found something." "What?" "I can't explain over the phone." "Then come home." "I am." She hesitated. "If anything happens to me." Daniel laughed nervously. "Nothing's going to happen." Another silence. Then she said words he'd never forget. "Promise you'll protect Noah." The line disconnected. Emily never came home. Police called it a tragic highway accident. A truck lost control. Multiple vehicles. Wrong place. Wrong time. Case closed. Except, Daniel visited the wreck himself. The skid marks didn't match. Emily's airbags had never deployed, and the laptop she carried everywhere had vanished. So had the encrypted flash drive she'd mentioned only hours before. The official investigation ended within 4 days. Daniels began that same afternoon. Grief changes people. Some collapse. Some disappear. Daniel became patient. Dangerously patient. For almost 3 years, he rebuilt himself from scratch. He erased his professional history, sold everything, learned custodial work, took certification courses under another name, accepted jobs no one else wanted, night shifts, industrial cleaning, office towers. Eventually, he landed exactly where he'd hoped, Atlas Dynamics headquarters. Not as an analyst, not as an engineer, not as an executive, as a night security and maintenance contractor. Invisible. Exactly where invisible people hear everything. Executives never stop talking around someone holding a mop. They assume your furniture. Daniel encouraged that illusion. Head down, short answers. Perfect employee. Inside, he documented everything. Who stayed late? Who met secretly? Which offices required extra security? Which executives never used email? Which conversations suddenly stopped whenever someone entered? He learned the building better than most vice presidents. Every ventilation shaft, every emergency stairwell, every security camera blind spot, every server closet, every hidden archive room. Little by little, the puzzle Emily died trying to solve started revealing itself. Not enough for proof. Just enough to know she hadn't imagined any of it. Someone inside Atlas had been moving enormous amounts of money through shell contractors disguised as government subcontractors. Hundreds of millions. Maybe more. Every trail eventually disappeared. Someone very powerful kept cleaning the evidence. Daniel couldn't expose ghosts. He needed names. His entire reason for surviving waited every evening inside a tiny rented duplex 20 miles away. 9-year-old Noah. The boy had inherited Emily's smile, her stubbornness, and unfortunately, her weak immune system. Complications after a childhood illness required ongoing treatments that insurance barely covered. Every month, Daniel chose between replacing worn-out shoes or paying another hospital bill. He always chose the hospital. His own clothes became older. His car became rustier. His meals became cheaper. None of it mattered, as long as Noah kept smiling. Every morning before school, Daniel packed lunch with handwritten notes hidden inside. "You've got this. Mom would be proud. Love you more than yesterday." Noah saved every single one. Daniel didn't know that. Atlas Dynamics occupied nearly an entire city block outside Dallas, 48 floors, nearly 6,000 employees, private helipad, federal contracts, military security clearances. The place looked less like an office and more like a fortress. At the very top, office number 4801, Victoria Reynolds. Unlike most billionaires, Victoria had earned a reputation for refusing political favors and firing executives the moment dishonesty surfaced. Employees respected her, feared her, admired her. Daniel watched her from a distance for nearly 4 years. Something didn't fit. If she were running the corruption, why did so many executives seem nervous whenever she requested surprise audits? Why were meetings rescheduled whenever she appeared unexpectedly? Why did certain departments go strangely silent after she left? No, she wasn't protecting anyone. Someone was hiding things from her. That realization changed everything. Emily hadn't died because of Victoria. She died because someone close to Victoria needed her gone. Then came Michael Grant, Chief Operating Officer. Magazine covers loved him. Television interviews adored him. Veterans' charities praised him. Employees called him the nicest executive in America. Daniel called him something else, a professional actor. Grant remembered birthdays, complimented receptionists, tipped valets generously whenever cameras were nearby. But late at night, without witnesses, he became someone entirely different. Daniel watched him scream at assistants until they cried, threaten contractors, destroy phones during angry outbursts. One evening, he shoved an elderly janitor hard enough to knock him into a supply shelf, then smiled 5 minutes later while greeting investors downstairs. 2 different men lived inside Michael Grant. Only one wore the expensive smile. Everything changed on a Thursday. Daniel entered Grant's executive office shortly after 11 p.m. routine cleaning. Nothing unusual. Trash. Vacuum. Dust. Then, a folded sheet of paper lay beside the wastebasket, probably missed during shredding. Daniel unfolded it automatically. Years of investigation had trained his eyes to recognize patterns instantly. His pulse spiked. Bank routing numbers. Offshore account identifiers. 3 company names. One of them hit him like lightning. Blue Harbor Consulting. Emily had spoken that exact name once, 8 years ago. During dinner, she thought it sounded fake. She'd laughed. No real consulting company calls itself Blue Harbor. Daniel never forgot it. Now it sat printed in black ink, connected to transfers worth over $312 million. His hands started shaking. Finally, a real lead, before he could photograph the document. The office door clicked open. Daniel's blood froze. Someone was coming in. He had exactly 1 second to disappear. He slid behind a massive leather sofa just as polished dress shoes crossed the doorway. Michael Grant. And someone else. Daniel held his breath. One mistake. 8 years of sacrifice would disappear forever. Outside, thunder rolled across the Texas sky. Inside, Daniel was about to hear the conversation that would change everything. Daniel remained perfectly still behind the leather sofa. His heartbeat pounded so loudly he was certain the 2 men could hear it. The office lights stayed off. Only the glow from downtown Dallas spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished hardwood floor. Michael Grant poured himself a glass of bourbon. The other man nervously loosened his tie. Daniel recognized him immediately. Harold Pierce, Atlas Dynamics Chief Financial Officer. If Michael was the charming public face of the company, Harold was the numbers. Every budget, every wire transfer, every audit. Nothing moved without passing through his department. Daniel slowly pulled his phone from his pocket. No flashlight, no screen brightness, only the voice recorder. He pressed record. "Tomorrow changes everything," Michael said quietly. Harold didn't answer. Instead, he stared out the window toward the city skyline. "You still think this is a good idea?" Harold finally asked. "We're past asking questions," Harold swallowed. "The acquisition closes Friday," Michael smiled. "Exactly. And Victoria insisted on bringing in outside auditors. She won't." Harold turned. "What do you mean?" Michael casually swirled the bourbon. "She'll never sign the audit authorization." Silence. Daniel felt every muscle in his body tighten. Harold looked uncomfortable. "What exactly did you arrange?" Michael reached into his jacket. He placed a tiny silver cylinder on the desk. It looked almost like an insulin injector. Harold stared at it. "Is that it?" Michael nodded. "Tasteless, odorless, undetectable in standard toxicology." Harold's breathing became shallow. "You actually bought it." "I bought insurance." Harold rubbed both hands across his face. This has gone too far. Michael laughed softly. No, it went too far 8 years ago. Daniel nearly stopped breathing. 8 years. The same year Emily died. Harold lowered his voice. What if someone connects the dots? They won't. What about the old investigation? Closed. And Emily Brooks? Michael's smile disappeared. Ancient history. Daniel's fingernails dug into his palms. Every instinct screamed at him to jump out, to attack, to make the man say Emily's name again. Instead, he forced himself to stay silent. 8 years of patience depended on the next few minutes. Harold looked sick. I still don't understand why you're risking everything. Michael leaned against the desk. Because Victoria ruined the schedule. What schedule? The merger. Harold frowned. After tomorrow, she'll authorize a complete forensic review. I've delayed it twice already. If those auditors compare archived reserve accounts, Michael paused, they'll find every transfer. Harold whispered, $300 million. Michael corrected him. 312. Daniel's stomach twisted. 312 million. Emily had died trying to expose that. Harold stared at the injector. So tomorrow morning, Michael nodded. Victoria drinks from her water bottle. What happens? Massive cardiac arrest. Harold looked horrified. Immediately? Within 90 seconds. And afterward? Michael answered without emotion. The board declares a medical emergency. As Q, I become acting CEO. I approve the merger. The audit disappears. The money disappears. Everyone blames genetics. Daniel could barely process what he was hearing. History was repeating itself. Emily had been eliminated because she found the theft. Now Victoria was next. Not because she knew, but because she was about to find out. Harold's voice shook. What if the medical examiner? They won't find anything, Michael interrupted calmly. The compound mimics a naturally occurring heart attack. He smiled again. The company mourns. The stock dips. The merger closes. I become CEO. And 6 months later, everyone moves on. Daniel felt physically ill. 8 years. 8 years chasing answers. Now the man responsible had confessed everything. Yet one problem remained. Daniel had a recording, not proof. A defense attorney could call it fabricated, AI generated, edited. Without physical evidence, Michael could still escape. Harold looked toward the office door. I don't like this. You don't have to, Michael replied. You only have to remember one thing. If I fall, you fall first. Harold closed his eyes. Daniel suddenly understood. Harold wasn't innocent. He was trapped. Maybe willingly, maybe not, but trapped all the same. Michael picked up the silver injector. He carefully slid it back into his inside pocket. Tomorrow, 8:55, executive conference room. The bottle will already be waiting. Harold nodded weakly. What if someone notices? Michael smiled. No one notices maintenance staff. Daniel's jaw clenched. Invisible. That single word described his entire existence. Michael walked toward the office door, then stopped. Oh, one more thing. Harold looked up. I want every archive connected to Emily Brooks permanently erased after the merger. No personnel records, no emails, no payroll history, no backup copies. I want it to look like she never existed. Daniel's vision blurred with rage. Emily, reduced to a file someone wanted deleted. He bit the inside of his cheek so hard he tasted blood. Harold quietly answered, I'll take care of it. The office door opened, closed. Silence. Daniel waited. 1 minute. 2. 3. Only then did he crawl out from behind the sofa. His legs felt weak. He replayed the recording through one earbud. Every word was there, every confession. But something bothered him. Michael never explicitly admitted murdering Emily, he hinted. Referenced her. Connected timelines. But never said the words. Not enough. Still, it was the closest Daniel had come in 8 years. He photographed every document on the desk, every routing number, every account, every signature, then carefully returned everything exactly where he'd found it. No fingerprints, no trace. As he pushed his maintenance cart toward the freight elevator, one thought refused to leave his mind. Tomorrow morning, someone was going to try to kill Victoria Reynolds. And unless he found undeniable proof before then, no one would believe a night security guard over the beloved co-o of a billion-dollar company. Daniel barely slept. At 5:10 a.m., he quietly made pancakes for Noah before school. His son shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. You worked late again, Daniel smiled. Little bit. Noah noticed the exhaustion. You okay? Daniel forced another smile. Just tired. The boy studied his father's face for several seconds. You always say that when something's wrong. Daniel laughed quietly. Emily used to say the exact same thing. Noah reached into his backpack. I made something. He handed Daniel a folded piece of notebook paper. Inside, a crayon drawing. Just 2 stick figures, one tall, one small. Above them were 5 simple words. My dad is my hero. Daniel had to look away. He felt tears building. Dad, I'm okay. You sure? He nodded. I love you, buddy. I love you more. Daniel hugged him tighter than usual, longer than usual. For a brief second, he wondered if this might be the last morning they ever shared. Because if today went wrong, he'd either die or spend the rest of his life in prison. At exactly 6:15 a.m., Daniel dropped Noah at school, then drove toward Atlas Dynamics, toward the building where 8 years of lies were finally about to collide. By 8:10 a.m., Atlas Dynamics no longer felt like an office building. It felt like the center of the financial world. Television crews had gathered outside the main entrance. Black SUVs lined the circular driveway. Investment bankers, attorneys, government observers, and board members streamed through the revolving doors. Inside, every employee wore the same expression. Today would make history. No one realized history was about to take a very different turn. Daniel wheeled his gray maintenance cart through the executive floor one final time. Every movement had to look routine, calm, ordinary, invisible. Yet every second his eyes scanned, every hallway, every security camera, every executive assistant carrying trays toward the boardroom. He knew Michael's plan. He just didn't know exactly when the poisoned bottle would be switched. That uncertainty terrified him. At 8:32 a.m., he noticed something unusual. Victoria's longtime executive assistant, Melissa Carter, walked toward the executive kitchen carrying a silver tray. On it sat 4 unopened bottles of imported mineral water. Victoria always insisted on sealed bottles. No exceptions. Daniel quietly parked his cart near a decorative planter. From there, he had a clear view of the hallway. Melissa disappeared into the catering room. A minute later, her phone rang. Daniel couldn't hear the conversation, but he watched her expression change. She looked surprised, then worried. She hurried away toward human resources, leaving the tray completely unattended. Daniel's instincts screamed. This was it. Exactly 30 seconds later, Michael Grant appeared, completely alone. He glanced casually down both sides of the hallway. Empty. His hand slipped inside his suit jacket. Daniel felt his pulse explode. Michael removed the same silver injector Daniel had seen the night before. He didn't inject the bottle directly. Instead, he twisted open one cap only halfway, pressed the injector against the mouth, released a single clear droplet, then tightened the cap again with remarkable precision. 10 seconds. That was all it took. When Melissa returned, she thanked Michael for watching the tray. He smiled warmly. My pleasure. Daniel wanted to scream. Instead, he reached into his pocket and quietly activated the miniature body camera he'd secretly installed inside his employee badge months earlier. The tiny lens had captured everything, every movement, every second. Not close enough to identify the liquid, but close enough to show Michael tampering with Victoria's bottle. For the first time, Daniel possessed something that looked like real evidence. Still, would it be enough? 8:49 a.m., the board members began entering the conference room. Lawyers, investors, outside consultants, federal compliance observers, everyone important. Daniel watched through the glass walls while pretending to polish a brass railing. Victoria entered last. She wore a navy blue suit with silver accents. Confident, focused, completely unaware. Michael greeted her with an easy smile. You ready to make history? Victoria smiled back. I've been ready for 6 months. Daniel noticed something else. She trusted him. Completely. That made what came next even harder to watch. 8:54 a.m., Melissa carried the tray inside. One bottle was placed beside every executive. Victoria's rested directly beside the acquisition contract. Michael's eyes never left it. Daniel's breathing became shallow. This was the moment. If he acted too early, no one would believe him. Too late. Victoria would drink. He searched desperately for another option. Call security? They answered to Michael. Call police? By the time officers arrived, it would already be over. He looked around. Hundreds of employees. None knew. None suspected. Only one person in the entire building understood what was about to happen. Him. Inside the boardroom, Victoria stood. I'd like to thank everyone who helped make this acquisition possible. Applause filled the room. Daniel started walking, slowly, toward the conference room doors. His hands shook. Michael noticed him through the glass. Only for an instant. Their eyes met. Michael gave him the same polite smile he gave every maintenance worker, then dismissed him without another thought. Invisible. Exactly as planned. Except this time, Daniel wasn't walking past. Victoria reached for her bottle. Her fingers wrapped around the cap. Michael casually reached for his own. Everyone prepared for the ceremonial toast. Daniel broke into a sprint. The maintenance cart crashed sideways into a decorative table. Flowers exploded across the marble floor. Heads turned. The conference room doors flew open. Daniel burst inside. "Dawn, open that! B.O. Lee!" The room froze. Every executive stared. Every attorney stopped writing. Victoria's hand froze on the cap. Silence. Absolute silence. Then chaos. What the hell? "Security! Get him out!" Two corporate security officers rushed toward Daniel. Michael stood so abruptly his chair tipped backward. "Remove him immediately!" Daniel pointed directly at Victoria's water. "Don't drink it! It's poisoned!" Several executives laughed nervously. Someone muttered, "This guy's insane!" The guards grabbed Daniel's arms. He didn't resist. Instead, he shouted loud enough for everyone to hear. "I watched your Kuho tamper with that bottle 3 minutes ago." Every eye shifted toward Michael. His expression barely changed. He looked almost offended. "Victoria," Michael sighed. "I don't know this man. He's a maintenance contractor. I've seen him cleaning hallways. He clearly needs medical help." Several board members nodded. It sounded believable. Daniel expected that. Michael had spent years building the perfect public image. Who would believe a billionaire executive? Or a night janitor? Victoria studied Daniel carefully. Unlike everyone else, she wasn't looking at his clothes. She was watching his eyes. People faking panic usually overacted. Daniel wasn't acting. He looked terrified. Not for himself. For her. She slowly lowered the bottle onto the table. Michael noticed. For the first time, a tiny crack appeared in his composure. "Victoria, you don't seriously believe," she interrupted him. "If he's lying," she said calmly. "This will be very easy." She picked up the bottle, extended it across the table, toward Michael. "Drink it." The room became deathly quiet. Michael blinked once, then smiled. "Cute! Drink it," Victoria repeated. "It's unopened. You handed it to Melissa yourself. So if nothing's wrong," she pushed it another inch closer. "Prove him wrong." Michael didn't move. His smile faded almost imperceptibly. One board member looked back and forth between them. Another quietly lowered his pen. Daniel saw exactly what Victoria saw. Michael wasn't reaching for the bottle. He was calculating, looking for a way out. Victoria leaned forward. "Michael, I'm waiting," he laughed. "Seriously? You'd trust a maintenance worker over your own COO? "I trust behavior," Victoria answered quietly. "And right now," she looked him directly in the eyes, "your behavior concerns me." For the first time in years, Michael Grant had no prepared response, and Daniel realized something astonishing. The mask was finally beginning to crack. Michael looked from the bottle to Victoria, then to every member of the board. The room was completely silent. A dozen pairs of eyes waited for his answer. Finally, he laughed, a little too loudly. A stunt like this deserves an Oscar. No one joined him. Victoria never lowered the bottle. "Drink it." Michael spread his hands. "I don't drink sparkling water." "You've been drinking sparkling water in every executive meeting for 4 years. The voice came from the far end of the table. Melissa, Victoria's assistant. Everyone turned toward her. She frowned. "I order the same brand for you every Monday." Michael hesitated, only for half a second. But it was enough. Daniel saw the confidence begin to drain from his face. Victoria quietly placed the bottle back on the table. "No one touches it." Then she looked toward security. "Lock every exit on this floor." The guards exchanged uncertain glances. Michael immediately stepped forward. "This is ridiculous." Victoria's voice cut through the room. That wasn't a suggestion. The guards obeyed. Electronic locks clicked throughout the executive floor. Michael realized he wasn't leaving. Not anymore. Victoria turned toward Daniel. "You said you watched him tamper with my bottle." "Yes." "You have proof?" Daniel slowly removed his employee badge. It looked ordinary. He unclipped the back panel. Inside was a miniature recording device. "I installed this months ago." Michael's face changed, just slightly. But Daniel noticed. Victoria accepted the device. She handed it to the company's head of information security. "Project it." Within seconds, the massive presentation screen flickered to life. The video appeared. Timestamp: 8:3341 a.m. Melissa leaving the catering room. Michael approaching the unattended tray, looking both directions, removing something from his jacket, opening Victoria's bottle, injecting something, closing the cap, walking away. No audio, no close-up, but unmistakable. The room erupted. "What is he doing?" "Pause that. Run it again." Michael immediately pointed at the screen. "This proves nothing. It's completely out of context. He could have edited it." Daniel reached into another pocket. "I expected you'd say that. He placed his phone on the conference table. "I also recorded your conversation with Harold Pierce last night." Harold's face instantly turned white. Michael slowly turned toward him. "You." Daniel pressed play. The room filled with Michael's own voice. "She'll never sign the audit. Within 90 seconds, I become acting CEO. The money disappears. No one moved. No one breathed." Harold buried his face in his hands. Michael remained perfectly still, like a statue. The recording continued. "Erase every archive connected to Emily Brooks." Victoria slowly looked up. "Emily Brooks?" Daniel nodded. "My wife. She worked here 8 years ago. She discovered the missing money." Michael interrupted immediately. "That's a lie." Daniel ignored him. "She called me the night she died. She said she'd found something. She never made it home." Victoria's expression hardened. She turned toward Harold. "Is any of this true?" Harold couldn't answer. His breathing became erratic. "Harold." Still nothing. Then, almost inaudibly, "Yes." The word barely escaped his lips. Victoria closed her eyes, just for a moment. When she opened them again, the disappointment was far more frightening than anger. "How much?" Harold whispered. $312 million. A board member gasped. Another slowly removed his glasses. Victoria stared at the table. "My father trusted you." Harold nodded without looking up. "I know. You helped build this company." Another nod. "I know. So why?" Tears formed in Harold's eyes. "It started small. A temporary transfer, then another. Michael said we'd replace everything. We never did." Michael laughed bitterly. "Oh, don't pretend you're innocent now." Harold looked up. "You killed her." The room froze again. Michael smiled. "Careful." Harold's voice cracked. "You ordered the brakes cut." Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. Harold continued. "I told you we'd gone too far. You said she'd already copied the files. You said there was no choice." Victoria slowly sat down. Her hands trembled for the first time all morning. Michael looked around the room. Every face had turned against him. The mask was gone. Without warning, Michael bolted. He sprinted toward the emergency exit. The 2 security officers reacted instantly. Too late. Michael slammed one into the wall. The other crashed over a chair. He reached the hallway. Daniel ran after him. Years of lifting equipment and working overnight shifts had made him stronger than he looked. Michael reached the stairwell door. Daniel caught him by the shoulder. Michael spun violently. His fist connected with Daniel's jaw. Pain exploded across his face. Daniel staggered, but didn't fall. Michael swung again. Daniel blocked it. The 2 men crashed into the hallway wall. Employees scattered in panic. Michael shoved Daniel backward. "You ruined everything!" Daniel answered through clenched teeth. "No, you did!" Michael reached inside his jacket. Daniel's heart stopped. The silver injector. He hadn't discarded it. Michael lunged. Daniel grabbed his wrist. The injector flew across the hallway, sliding beneath a reception desk. The struggle continued. Michael was bigger, younger, but desperate people make mistakes. He threw a wild punch. Daniel ducked. Michael's momentum carried him directly into the marble wall. Before he could recover, security tackled him from behind. 3 guards, then 4. Finally, they forced both wrists into handcuffs. Michael stopped struggling. He simply stared at Daniel. "You think you won?" Daniel looked him straight in the eyes. "My wife won. For the first time." Michael had nothing to say. Minutes later, police arrived, then detectives, then federal investigators. The executive floor transformed into a crime scene. Hazmat specialists collected the water bottle. Laboratory technicians secured the injector. Every computer inside Michael's office was seized. Harold quietly surrendered. He signed a full confession before noon. By evening, federal agents had frozen dozens of offshore accounts. The money trail Emily had uncovered 8 years earlier finally had names attached to it. Daniel expected to be arrested. Instead, a detective entered the interview room carrying coffee. "You know," he smiled, "you technically broke about 20 company policies." Daniel nodded. "And probably several federal laws." "I know. You still planted surveillance devices." "I did." "You accessed confidential servers." "Yes." The detective smiled again. "The Department of Justice isn't interested in prosecuting the man who prevented a corporate assassination." Daniel blinked. "So, you're free to go." The door opened again. Victoria Reynolds walked inside. She looked exhausted, but grateful. She sat across from Daniel. "I owe you my life. You don't owe me anything. I couldn't save Emily." Victoria lowered her eyes. "I should have." Daniel shook his head. "You didn't know. I should have." Silence filled the room. Finally, she slid a folder across the table. Inside, a check. large enough that Daniel thought he'd misread the number. "I can't accept this. It's not charity. It's compensation." For exposing the largest fraud in company history. Daniel slowly pushed it back. "I didn't do it for money. I know." Victoria smiled. "That's exactly why you deserve it." She opened another folder. This one isn't optional. Inside was another document. Director of Corporate Integrity. Salary. Benefits. Ownership shares. Medical insurance. Daniel stared speechlessly. Victoria continued. "I've spent years hiring brilliant executives. I should have been looking for honest people." "You've already proven you're one of them." Daniel looked down at the offer. Then thought of Noah. Hospital bills. Late night shifts. Empty refrigerators. His son's drawing still folded inside his wallet. "My dad is my hero?" He quietly smiled. "I'll accept." 3 months later, Noah ran across a baseball field faster than Daniel had ever seen. His latest medical tests had come back better than expected. With proper treatment, doctors believed he'd live a completely normal life. Daniel sat in the bleachers watching him laugh with friends. For the first time in almost a decade, he wasn't looking over his shoulder. Later that afternoon, he visited Emily's grave. He placed fresh white lilies beside the headstone. "They're gone," he whispered. They admitted everything. The truth finally caught up with them. A gentle breeze moved through the trees. Daniel smiled. "Noah's okay. He talks about you every day. I think you'd be proud of him." He stood quietly for another minute, then turned toward the parking lot. His phone buzzed. A message from Victoria. "Board meeting starts in 30 minutes. Don't be late, Director Brooks." Daniel laughed. 8 years earlier, he'd entered Atlas Dynamics through the service entrance carrying a mop. Today, he walked through the front doors carrying the authority to make sure no employee would ever become invisible again. Because sometimes, the people everyone overlooks are the only ones willing to risk everything for the truth.